Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Pure Pathways. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي بسم الله. So the last time we were together, we were talking about the state of the Arabian Peninsula during the times of Jahiliyyah. If you remember, we said the time of Jahiliyyah was the time of ignorance before the revelation of the Quran. We looked at the oppressive social norms, barbaric forms of entertainment, religious practices, and the ill treatment of women at the time. So who would have thought that from that very society, the one we described, an unlettered prophet would emerge, one whose teachings would save humanity from the darkness and change the world forever. Today, we're going to talk about that prophet's experience with the first revelation, the night Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam became the last prophet sent to mankind, the night of power, Laylatul Qadr. But before we fast forward to that very special night, let's rewind a little bit and talk about the qualities that made Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam Allah's choice to carry out the mission of bringing Islam to the world. Let's look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared him for prophecy. Even in the womb of his mother, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought comfort to Amina radiallahu anha. Now, if you've ever been around a pregnant woman, you'll always hear her complaining about all these aches and pains and symptoms that she has. But with Amina radiallahu anha, her pregnancy was pretty easy. She would sometimes hear voices telling her that she was carrying a very blessed child. And one night she dreamt that a light shone from her belly and lit up all of Arabia from Mecca to Syria. So she knew that the child she was carrying in her womb was going to be special. When Muhammad ﷺ was born, his grandfather Abdul Muttalib actually was the one who named him Muhammad, because he knew that this was a special boy and that one day he would be praised. Now, if we look at the lineage of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we'll see that he came from a very noble family. His grandfather was a well-known and respected merchant in Arabia. He had never worshipped an idol before, and he believed in the Tawheed that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam taught. The Prophet's forefathers were the chiefs of Quraysh. Quraysh was the tribe that was entrusted with the honor of giving food and drink to the pilgrims of Mecca. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the school of life. From a young age, he learned that life was tough. His father Abdullah died before the Prophet was even born. His mother Amina radiallahu anha died when the Prophet was only 6 years old. As an orphan, the Prophet ﷺ moved into the home of his grandfather Abdul Muttalib. Now, Abdul Muttalib was a very wealthy man and a very respected merchant. He treated the Prophet ﷺ like his own son. While living in the home of his grandfather, Muhammad ﷺ grew up surrounded by successful merchants. And every time they discussed business dealings or war strategies or peace treaties, Muhammad ﷺ was there listening and gaining all of that knowledge. He learned how to become a very successful merchant, and he matured a lot faster than boys his age. The Prophet ﷺ loved his grandfather so much. His grandfather always gave him preferential treatment and made him feel special. But unfortunately, this too came to an end when 2 years later, Abdul Muttalib also passed away. Muhammad then moved in to the home of his uncle Abu Talib. Now, Abu Talib was well known and respected in the community, and despite the fact that he was a merchant, he struggled to support his family. In the house of Abu Talib, Muhammad ﷺ learned how to be a successful merchant. He learned about the art of trade, he learned how to deal with all types of people. These were all things that helped him later on in his life. Abu Talib always treated Muhammad ﷺ like a son, and they grew to love one another. And you can see when you study the seerah that later on, after Muhammad ﷺ becomes a prophet, we can see that his life and Abu Talib's life become very intertwined with one another. Now, an important thing that I want to mention before we move on is I just want us to note the fact that along the way, as the Prophet ﷺ was moving from home to home and growing up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him from all kinds of things that could cause his heart to become impure. So you know that when youth are growing up, they tend to fall and to mischief here and there. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always protected the Prophet from being around the festivities or the weddings that took place in Mecca, the ones where there was a lot of drunkenness or there was indecency or shamelessness taking place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always curbed the Prophet away from these kinds of events and kept his heart pure. Now we can see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose a very difficult childhood for our Prophet. He could have easily given him a life of luxury and ease, but this was all part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom. If the Prophet had grown up being pampered and living a life of luxury, that would not have prepared him at all for the great life of sacrifice that he was about to face. It definitely wouldn't have prepared him for the huge responsibility that was about to fall on his shoulders. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala managed to teach the Prophet so much without having a mother or a father. And the Prophet learned through this hardship to adapt to changing situations. Each home he lived in taught him something different. And in each home, subhanAllah, with Allah's mercy, there was always someone there to love the Prophet. The Prophet learned that life could be tough at times and that the people that you love can easily be taken away from you. Now, usually children who lose so many loved ones at such a young age grow up to be tough, merciless, and void of any emotion at all. But not our Prophet ﷺ. To the contrary, he was so forgiving and merciful that he wouldn't even make dua against the kuffar who hurt him. We can see many instances in the seerah where Muhammad ﷺ would be asking forgiveness for those who inflicted pain upon him, even as the blood was still dripping from his body. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, how merciful he was to all of mankind. Later on, we see that when the Prophet ﷺ became an adult, he would constantly tease the Sahaba, he would play with children on the street. When he would find, that someone who was upset, he would make an effort to go to that person and make him feel better. All of his childhood experiences really allowed him to grow into an adult who empathized with the orphans and the poor. He understood them. He had been in their shoes before. All of these experiences really, really made him into a generous and understanding adult. His parents' death gave him the power to give to others. He knew the reality of life firsthand. He knew that life was fleeting. He would never live for money or power or fame. And we know that later on in the seerah, Quraysh do offer him all of those things, but not our Prophet. Our Prophet ﷺ always lived for the akhirah. And even later on, when he became the most powerful man in Arabia, we can see that he lived a very simple life. He was the perfect example of modesty, always giving to the people around him. And sometimes this can be like a little mini lesson for us, that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take from you to give you something even better. For example, if I live for beauty, eventually my beauty is going to fade. I'm going to become an old woman and everything's going to go downhill from there, beauty-wise. If I'm going to live for popularity, well, those friends are eventually going to leave me one way or another. If I'm going to live for money, well, eventually when I die, somebody else is going to inherit all that money. So it's a lesson for us to live for the things that are forever, the akhirah, and not live for this dunya, which is fleeting and will eventually be gone. So now let's go back to what we were talking about before in the house of Abu Talib. Muhammad ﷺ was very sensitive to his uncle's financial situation, and he really wanted to take the financial burden off of his shoulders. So as a young adult, Muhammad ﷺ took the job as a shepherd in the outskirts of Medina. Now we know that being a shepherd is a commonality among the prophets. Why? Being a shepherd teaches observation, it teaches patience. The sheep, they constantly wander off and they scatter, and the shepherd's job is to protect the flock from the wolves and to make sure that all of the sheep are fed, and to bring back that one sheep that wandered away, to bring it back to the safety of the rest of the group. So this job as the shepherd lasted for about 7 years and gave the Prophet leadership qualities that he would later benefit from when he would carry out his mission. Later on, he went on to become a merchant, which gave him about 20 years of experience dealing with all kinds of people. So the last thing I want to mention is that the Prophet had a long-standing reputation with the people of Mecca as being truthful, as being honest, as never having told a lie. When people would actually leave Mecca to go on a journey, they would leave their belongings with Muhammad ﷺ because they knew that he was honest, and they knew that their belongings were safe with him. If two people in the community had an argument, they would go to the Prophet ﷺ to solve that argument for them. If there was a problem in the community, they would go to him because they really valued his opinion. They nicknamed him As-Sadiq Al-Amin, which means the truthful and the trustworthy. And this really gave him a good reputation in Mecca, and this would benefit him later on when he would receive the revelation and go to the people and tell them that he was a prophet sent to them from God. Now, obviously, I could go on and on about the great qualities of our Prophet ﷺ, but this was meant to be just a really quick overview of the qualities that made him the best choice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the last prophet to mankind. And of course, we always say Allahu A'lam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best of why he chose him. Now, with that being said, let's fast forward to when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 38 years old. The universe was full of signs of a creator. The desert encouraged the Prophet to observe and meditate, and he began to develop a relationship with nature. Follow me. So, what do you think of the change in scenery? It's pretty cool, huh? I just wanted to take you guys to a different place to help you better visualize the next part of our lesson, which is about Laylatul Qadr, or the night of the revelation of the Holy Quran. So let's go back a little bit. We were just talking about how Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam began to feel a very strong connection with nature, and nature began talking to him, and not just figuratively talking to him, but physically and literally talking to him. Now we know that Muhammad ﷺ told the Sahaba in his own words that before the revelation, I began to hear stones greeting me in my path. So the universe was actually speaking to him. I mean, he would be walking in the streets of Mecca, and he would hear voices praising him and greeting him as he was walking down his path. And he would turn around and there would be nobody there. I mean, the stones and the trees started praising him. It started telling him, Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah. Peace be upon you, O Messenger of Allah. Then, a little while after that, he started to see dreams. And those dreams would become reality. They would come true. And this lasted for about 6 months or so. For a little while, he was a little worried and was wondering, what's happening to me? But his wife, Khadija, radiallahu anha, told him, just don't worry. I really believe in my heart that these are good signs. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was sending him signs to indicate that something special was about to happen to him, that he was not like everyone else, and that he was being prepared for something extraordinary. Now, during this period, our Prophet ﷺ became very unhappy with the state of his people, and he started to seclude himself from society. He was engaging in something called tafakkur. For about 30 days he did this. He would go up to Jabal al-Nur, which was a mountain in Mecca, and he would climb to the very top, to a cave called Hira, very similar to the one that we're sitting in right now, except Ghar Hira was really small, and it would only fit 1 or 2 people. Now, in order for him to reach that cave, the Prophet had to climb up a small mountain, up another small peak, follow a narrow pathway to a very secluded cave. From the mouth of that cave, he was able to see the Kaaba very clearly, because remember, back then there weren't all these tall buildings that you have in Mecca now that would be blocking the view. And so the Kaaba was in plain view, and behind the Kaaba, the Prophet ﷺ would just see all the barren plains stretching out as far as his eye could see. I mean, I can imagine it was a very beautiful and serene place to sit. Now the Prophet would take supplies with him, and he would sit up there in isolation, pondering the creation of his creator. And sometimes his wife Khadija radiallahu anha would climb up there and spend time with him as well. Now the Prophet ﷺ would sit up there just thinking about the state of life, just searching for peace and meaning. Back then, there was no salah, there was no tasbih, none of the ibadat that we know of today. He was just thinking, just looking for answers with his heart and his mind. And even today, tafakkur is a kind of worship. If you or I sat outside and just gazed up at the stars and looked around at the creation of our Creator and thought about His majesty and thought about the meaning of our lives on earth, then we would actually receive hasanat for that. We would get ajr and be rewarded for that. But as a side note, I just want to make sure we understand that Islam does not call for us to isolate ourselves from society. Isolating ourselves from people is not a sunnah. It's not a sunnah of the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ did not do this after he received revelation. Actually, the Quran tells us that if we want to be in isolation with our Creator, that we should engage in Qiyamul Layl, which is the night prayer. And that's our time to be alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the second revelation that came down were actually ayat from Surah Al-Muddathir, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the Prophet to get up and warn the people. He tells him to get up and be active. Ya ayyuhal muddathir, qum fa'anzir. Get up, take action. So this is a call for acting and not for isolating. We just need to make sure that that's very clear to us. So now, let's go to that night. The night of the first revelation, Laylatul Qadr. It was a very dark night and there was minimal moonlight outside. Now, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was all alone in that cave. Khadija radiallahu anha was not with him at the time. Now, I want you to think back to a time when you were sitting alone in your room at night and it was really quiet and really dark and suddenly someone showed up behind you. You probably freaked out, right? You probably jumped a mile. Of course, that's natural. Well, the Prophet ﷺ faced a very similar situation. The Prophet ﷺ was sitting in that cave all alone and suddenly Angel Jibreel alayhi salam appeared to him in his original form. And our Prophet later reports that the angel had over 600 wings with pearls that were rolling off of them. So everywhere the Prophet looked, he looked to the east and he looked to the west. Everywhere that he looked, he saw that the angel covered the entire horizon with his light. Now, despite Jibreel's beauty, the Prophet was very scared. I mean, this is natural. He was only a human being. Jibreel came up to him and squeezed him very tightly and commanded him, Iqra, that one word, read. Muhammad ﷺ responded, Ma ana biqari, I can't read. I'm not from those people who could read, because remember we said that he was unlettered, he was illiterate. Then Jibreel alayhi salam squeezed him a second time. And the Prophet later reports to us that he squeezed him so tightly that he felt that his ribs were going to break. He felt that he couldn't breathe. It was crushing. Again, the angel commanded him, Iqra, read. And again, our Prophet ﷺ said, I can't read. Ma ana biqari. For a third time, Jibreel alayhi salam squeezed him even tighter to the point where the Prophet ﷺ said that he felt that he was going to die at that moment from how hard he was being squeezed. And for this time, Muhammad ﷺ gave in. He said, okay, what should I read? Now we know he couldn't read, but out of his fear, he gave in to that and asked, what should I read? Now this is exactly when Jibreel alayhi salam recites the first 5 ayat of Surah Al-Alaq. And those ayat are commanding, read in the name of your Lord who created. Let's listen to those ayat now.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم.
After he recites those 5 ayat, he just disappears. And it's pitch black again. And Muhammad ﷺ is all alone in the cave. And he's so scared, he gets up and he starts running out of that cave, down Jabal al-Nur and back home. Now he could have easily ran to his best friend, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, but instead he ran home to Khadija radiallahu anha, his loving and loyal wife, and he said to her, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, which means cover me, cover me. He was so scared, he was shaking, he felt cold because of his fear. And Khadija radiallahu anha comforted him and made him feel better. Now, it's natural that the Prophet was scared. He doesn't understand what just happened to him. He realizes that some kind of a being came to him, and to him it felt like that this being was trying to hurt him. So Khadija radiallahu anha responds and says, no, wallahi, no, I swear that God would not hurt you. You're good to your family. You take people's burdens from them. You give to the poor. You're hospitable to your guests, and you do all kinds of good things. Now notice that she didn't tell him, no, God won't hurt you because you sit in isolation or you sit alone. No. She mentioned all the things about him, the things that were part of his good character. And we can see why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose her specifically to be his wife. She could see the truth in her heart without any Quran. She wasn't a quote-unquote Muslim yet. She didn't know any verses of our Quran yet. But she understood in her heart that goodness could only bring goodness, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that her creator would never hurt her husband Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now we know that for about 23 years, this same angel, Angel Jibreel, would continue to visit our Prophet, would slowly bring down the glorious Quran until its completion. Now this is where we're going to stop for today, and inshallah next time we'll do part 3, and we'll talk about 3 things. First of all, why was Iqra the first word that was revealed from the Holy Quran? Second of all, why was the Holy Quran first revealed in a cave? Why not a king's castle, for example, or any other place? And third of all, we're going to look at how the Quran was compiled, how it was brought together and put in the order that it's in today, and how it was preserved so that we could receive the revelation exactly as it came down over 1400 years ago. So inshallah, I'll see you next time. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and send du'as. I wish you the best. Assalamu alaikum. See you soon.